The rain had no business falling that hard on a Tuesday night. But there he was, Ethan Wolfe, the man who once wore arrogance like a second suit, on his knees at the iron gates of the Voss estate, soaking wet, his designer shoes swallowed by a puddle, his hands pressed together like a man praying to a god he had never believed in. Inside the black town car parked just beyond the gate, Nadia Crown did not move. She did not flinch. She did not smile. She simply watched him through the tinted glass the way someone watches weather, detached, unbothered, already planning what to do when it passes. Her assistant leaned forward from the front seat. "Should I call security, Ms. Voss?" Nadia picked up her champagne glass, took a slow sip, and said, "Give him 3 more minutes. Let him feel it." That is the thing about revenge when it is done correctly. It does not look like rage. It looks like patience. And Nadia Crown had been patient for exactly 93 days. 3 months earlier, she had been someone else entirely. Or rather, she had been playing someone else entirely, a quiet woman in soft cardigans and flat shoes, a woman who cooked dinner at 7 and waited for a husband who rarely came home before midnight. A woman named Nadia Crown, because Ethan had never asked enough questions to learn her real surname. She had loved him in the beginning, or she had loved who she thought he was. Funny how those two things feel identical until they do not. The morning everything ended, Nadia had been in the kitchen making coffee when Ethan walked in already dressed in his best charcoal suit, briefcase in hand, the particular set of his jaw that meant he had already decided something without consulting her. "We need to talk," he said, and sat down at the table without pouring himself any coffee. Nadia set a mug in front of him anyway, force of habit. He slid a manila envelope across the marble counter. "Divorce papers. I've already signed my portion. I just need yours." She looked at the envelope. She looked at him. "Okay," she said. Ethan blinked. He had clearly expected more. Crying, perhaps, begging. He had probably rehearsed a speech. "Okay," he repeated. "Is there something else you wanted to say?" He cleared his throat and leaned back in his chair with the practiced ease of someone who had been told too many times that he was handsome. "I think you know this hasn't been working for a while, Nadia. I need someone who fits the life I'm building. Someone with connections. Influence. He paused, and the pause was cruel. "You're a lovely person. You're just not the right person for where I'm going." "And where are you going?" "Sophia Crane and I," he watched her face carefully, looking for the wound. "We've been seeing each other for 4 months. Her father owns half the real estate in the financial district. This is a strategic move for the business. You understand that?" Nadia understood a great many things Ethan did not know she understood. She opened the envelope and looked at the papers. They were thorough. His lawyer had made sure she would leave with nothing beyond the legal minimum. No stake in his company. No claim to the apartment. A small settlement offer was paper-clipped to the front page. A personal check from Ethan himself for $5,000 with the memo line reading, "Thank you." She almost laughed. Ethan was watching her with something that might have been guilt if he had been capable of guilt. "I know it's not much, but you never really worked during our marriage, so." "I know." She picked up the pen he had left on the table, a cheap plastic pen, the kind you find in a hotel drawer. "You're not going to fight this?" "No." "You're not going to ask why?" She looked up at him then, and for just a moment something flickered in her eyes that made Ethan Wolfe feel, inexplicably, like he had made a very expensive mistake. Then it was gone, and she was just Nadia again, soft, quiet, impossible to read. "I know exactly why," she said. She signed the papers with 3 fluid strokes and placed the pen beside them. Then she picked up his check, looked at it for a long moment, and folded it into a paper crane with the neat precision of someone who had been doing origami since childhood. She set the crane on top of the papers. "I'll have my things out by tomorrow morning," she said, and went to get her coat. Ethan stared at the paper crane. "That's it, that's all you have to say." She paused at the door and looked back at him. "You'll hear from me again, Ethan, just not the way you're expecting." Then she walked out, pulled out her phone, and called the one number she had not dialed in 3 years. It rang twice before a man's voice answered, rough and warm and immediately worried. "Nadia." "Father," she said, "pick me up, I'm coming home." There was a pause. "Are you all right?" "I will be." Now, if you've been enjoying this story, and I think you have, do yourself a favor and hit that like button right now. It genuinely helps more people find stories like this one, and we have so much further to go. The motorcade that arrived at Ethan's apartment building 20 minutes later consisted of 4 vehicles, 2 black SUVs, a town car, and a vehicle at the front with diplomatic plates that the doorman could not stop staring at. Nadia emerged from the building with one suitcase. A man in a dark suit took it from her before she could lift it herself. She got into the town car. The city slid past the windows as they drove east, then north, then through neighborhoods that grew quieter and greener and more expensive with every block, until finally the car turned through a gate, automatic, iron, crested, and up a private drive lined with trees so old they had their own history. The Voss estate. Her father was waiting on the steps. He was a tall man, silver-haired, with the kind of face that appeared on the covers of financial magazines under headlines like The Steel King, How Marcus Voss Rebuilt an Empire in a Decade. He looked like a man accustomed to controlling rooms. Right now, he looked like a man trying very hard to control himself. 3 years, he said. You disappeared for 3 years. I didn't disappear. I called every Sunday. You didn't tell me where you were. I know. He exhaled. I could have buried him. The moment you left, I could have made one phone call and that man would have lost everything within a week. Why didn't you let me? Nadia kissed her father's cheek. Because then it would have been your victory, not mine. She walked past him into the house. Give me 2 days to settle in. Then I want a full brief on every company in Ethan's business network, every deal he's currently pursuing, every investor he's courting. And I want my office back. Marcus Voss watched his daughter walk into his home like she owned it. Because, of course, she did. And something in his chest unknotted itself for the first time in 3 years. He smiled and followed her inside. The rebirth of Nadia Crown was not a montage. It was a series of very deliberate decisions made by a woman who had been thinking clearly for longer than anyone around her realized. She resumed her position as executive vice president of Voss Global Holdings on a Wednesday. The announcement was quiet, an internal memo, a brief note in the financial press, but its effect was immediate. Stock prices shifted. Phones rang in offices across the city. People who had been on a waiting list to meet with Voss Global for months suddenly found that their timeline had accelerated. The woman who arrived at the 42nd floor in a charcoal blazer and a calm expression was not the woman Ethan had imagined her to be. She had never been that woman. She had simply been very good at not being seen. "Ms. Voss," said her assistant, falling into step beside her, "you have 14 meeting requests, 6 merger proposals, and a note from someone named Ethan Wolfe requesting an urgent call. Put the meeting requests in order of strategic value, forward the merger proposals to legal, and delete the note from Mercer." "Yes, ma'am." She paused at the door of her office, floor-to-ceiling windows, the whole city spread below like a board game. "What is Mercer currently working on?" Her assistant glanced at a tablet. "He's trying to close a deal with Haverford Capital, a development project worth around $60 million. He's been courting their lead investor for 6 weeks. "Haverford Capital," Nadia said slowly. "Who holds their secondary debt?" A pause. "We do, actually. Your father acquired it 2 years ago." Nadia sat down at her desk. "Interesting. Schedule a call with Haverford's managing director this afternoon." At roughly the same moment, on the other side of the city, Ethan Wolfe, was having what he believed to be the best month of his life. The deal with Haverford was practically done. Sophia Crane was on his arm at every event, her father's name opening doors that had previously been locked to Ethan. He felt, for the first time in his career, that everything was finally coming together. He had made the right moves. He had cut the dead weight. He thought about Nadia occasionally, in the way you think about a meal you did not finish briefly, without guilt. Then the calls started. First, Haverford Capital. Their managing director, who had been enthusiastic as recently as last Thursday, called to say the deal structure needed to be re-examined. Something about senior debt obligations. He would be in touch. Then two of Ethan's secondary investors sent emails, polite but firm, explaining they were redirecting their capital to other opportunities. Then Sophia called, and her voice had an edge he had not heard before. "My father just lost a contract, a major one, with a company called Voss Global Holdings. Have you ever heard of them?" Ethan had not, but the name registered somewhere vaguely. What happened? "I don't know. He says it came out of nowhere. Some new executive rejected the renewal. He's furious." Ethan tried to reassure her. He tried to reassure his investors. He tried to reschedule the Haverford meeting. He sent emails to the mysterious executive at Voss Global who kept rejecting his appeals, someone named N. Crown, and received the same response each time. A brief, pleasant note from an assistant explaining that Ms. Voss was not available to meet at this time. He did not yet understand what was happening to him. That was the cruelest part. He was being taken apart piece by someone who had thought this through very, very carefully, and he did not even know where to look. If you're not subscribed yet, this is your sign. Hit that subscribe button. Stories like this drop weekly, and you do not want to miss what happens next. The charity gala was held at the Aldrin Hotel on a Thursday evening in November, and Ethan Wolfe had not been invited. He attended anyway, on the arm of a business contact who had a +1 and owed him a favor. He had come with a specific purpose: to find donors, to network, to salvage something from what had become a genuinely frightening month. He had lost 2 clients. The Haverford deal was in active collapse, and Sophia, though still present, had become brittle and distant in the way of women who are beginning to calculate their exit. The ballroom was extraordinary, crystal, candlelight, the soft noise of very expensive conversations. Ethan moved through it with the practiced smile of a man performing confidence he no longer felt. Then the host called for attention, and the room quieted. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are honored tonight to welcome the guest of honor and lead patron of this year's gala, Ms. Nadia Crown, Executive Vice President of Voss Global Holdings and newly appointed chair of the Aldrin Foundation." Applause. A figure descended the main staircase at the far end of the ballroom. She wore black. She wore diamonds, a single strand at her throat, small and perfect. She moved the way money moves when it is old enough to be comfortable, without announcement, without effort. The room reorganized itself around her without anyone seeming to notice it was doing so. Ethan stared. He knew that profile. He knew the angle of that jaw, the particular way she held her shoulders. But the woman descending those stairs could not be. It was impossible. "Nadia," he said, and said it too loudly, and several people nearby turned to look at him. He pushed through the crowd toward her. A security guard materialized from nowhere and placed one large hand on his shoulder. "Sir, that woman, I know her. I need to speak with her. Ms. Voss is not accepting unscheduled introductions this evening." "You don't understand, she's my—" He stopped. What was she? His ex-wife. A woman he had handed a $5,000 check and a paper crane of. "Tell her Ethan Wolfe needs to speak with her. Tell her it's urgent." The security guard did not move, but across the room Nadia glanced toward the commotion. Her eyes found Ethan's face. Something passed across her expression, not surprise, not satisfaction, something quieter than either. She turned back to the person she was speaking with and continued the conversation without missing a beat. Ethan was escorted to the lobby. He stood there in his rented tuxedo and listened to the sound of the gala continuing without him. That was the moment, not the kneeling, not the foreclosure, not the letter from his lawyers. That was the moment Ethan Wolfe understood what was happening to him, and who was making it happen. The collapse came quickly after that, the way these things do when the foundation has already been removed. Haverford Capital withdrew entirely. Their managing director sent a 2-line email. 3 more investors followed. Sophia Crane, it emerged, had been quietly transferring funds from their shared accounts for 6 weeks, a detail that would have been merely unpleasant if Ethan had not, in a catastrophic moment of optimism, added her name to those accounts after his own finances had begun to strain. He arrived at his office one morning to find the locks changed. A notice from the bank was taped to the door. His apartment, the one Nadia had walked out of, the one he had never offered her a fair share of, was next. He found a business card in his mailbox on the afternoon the foreclosure was finalized. Clean white card, embossed lettering. VOSS Global HOLDINGS Account Acquisition Division Senior Manager of Acquired Debt, in Crown. There was a handwritten note on the back, in the same clean, unhurried handwriting that had once signed his grocery lists. Hello, Ethan. We seem to have acquired your debt. Do feel free to be in touch. He stood in the hallway of his now former building and read it 3 times. He had never once asked what her last name was. In 3 years of marriage, it had never occurred to him to ask. He had called her a nobody and meant it. Drop a comment below. What would you have said in that moment? Because what Ethan did next was perhaps the most predictable and most desperate thing a man like him could do. He found her address. It was not difficult. Her name was in the financial press now, had been for weeks, and her family estate had been photographed for an architectural magazine. He drove there on a Tuesday night in the rain, in a car that was not his, borrowed from a friend who had not yet heard how bad things had gotten. He rang the intercom at the gate. It took a long time for anyone to answer. I need to speak with Ms. Voss, he said to the speaker. A pause. Your name? Ethan Wolfe. Another pause, longer than, please wait. He waited. The rain intensified. He pressed the intercom again. No answer. He rang it again. Still nothing. He stood there in his wet suit with water running down the back of his collar and something breaking open in his chest that felt like the long-delayed arrival of a bill he had always known was coming. He sank to his knees. He was not sure why. It felt like the only honest position left. The gate did not open. But the side door of the town car parked inside the gate swung open, and Nadia Crown stepped out. She was wearing a coat the color of storm clouds, and she stood 10 feet away from him with her hands in her pockets and looked at him the way you look at a problem you have already finished solving. Ethan, she said, not a greeting, just his name, accurate and flat like a diagnosis. Nadia, his voice broke on the second syllable. I didn't know who you were. If I had known, you would have treated me differently. Yes, I'm sorry. I am genuinely. I know, she tilted her head slightly. That's the part that matters least to me. I need help. He hated saying it. She could see that he hated it, and she did not soften toward him for it. The debt your company holds, if I could have a meeting, if I could explain my position, I have ideas, I have plans. I can rebuild if someone will just give me a bridge loan, 6 months, even 3. Ethan, her voice was not unkind. It was something colder than unkind. It was indifferent. You did not love me when I was a nobody. You do not get to serve me now that I am a somebody. She paused. My assistant will show you out. She turned back toward the car. Nadia, his voice cracked, please, I'm begging you, I have nothing. She stopped, her back still to him. I know, she said quietly. I know exactly what you have. She got into the car. The door closed, the tinted window rose. Then the car pulled forward, and its tires found the puddle at the base of the gate, and the water rose in a clean, cold arc. Ethan Wolfe knelt in the rain and watched the taillights disappear. The gate locked behind her with a sound like a full stop at the end of a very long sentence. In her office the following morning, Nadia stood at the window with a cup of coffee and looked out at the city she had grown up in and left and returned to and remade in that order. On her desk was a photograph, one she had kept, for reasons she had not fully examined, from her other life. Ethan laughing at a restaurant somewhere, herself beside him, smaller than she needed to be, smiling at the camera when she should have been looking at him more carefully. She picked it up, she held it for a moment. She fed it into the shredder. The machine ran for 3 seconds, and then the office was quiet. Her assistant knocked. "Ms. Voss, the Singapore call is ready." "Put them through." She straightened her jacket. She picked up her coffee. She walked back toward the window and the city and all the work that was still ahead of her. The ending is not the revenge. The ending is the morning after, when there is nothing left to avenge and everything left to build. And Nadia Crown had always been, above all else, a builder. If you made it all the way to the end, first of all, you are exactly the kind of person this channel is made for. Thank you. Like this video, subscribe for new stories every week, and drop a comment telling me who you think is the most satisfying character in this story. I'll see you in the next one.